The whole town of Silver Creek packed into the little white church to watch a hanging that was called a wedding. The pews groaned under the weight of ranchers and miners, ladies in faded Sunday dresses, and rough men who smelled of sweat and whiskey. No one came to celebrate. They came to see if the stories were true. They came to get a look at the most feared mountain man in the Montana Territory and the unlucky girl forced to marry him. Abigail Carter stood at the front of the church in a simple blue calico dress that had once belonged to her mama. Her hands shook so badly she had to twist the fabric just to keep them still. She was 20 years old, with soft brown hair pinned tight and eyes that always tried to see the good in people. Today, those eyes stared straight ahead at the wooden cross on the wall because she could not bring herself to look at the man beside her. "Elias Boone," the town whispered. He was not just a man. He was a legend told in low voices around campfires. A trapper who lived alone high in the Bitterroot Mountains. Folks said he killed 3 men in a mining camp brawl. Said he once dragged a wounded grizzly off a boy with his bare hands. Said he could track a man through a river and shoot a crow clean from the sky at 100 yards. Some called him a hero. Most called him a killer. To Abby, he was a stranger who had just bought her like a mule. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, his voice trembling almost as much as Abby's hands, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Abby felt the weight of a dozen eyes pressing into her back. She could almost hear the whispers sliding between the pews. Poor thing, Carter's girl. Sold to Boone to pay that no-good father's debts. Her father stood near the door of the church, his hat twisted in his hands. His eyes shone with something that was not shame. It was relief. The gambling markers were cleared. The ranch would not be He would sleep easy tonight while she walked out of this church with a man everyone feared. Abby swallowed hard. She had begged her father to find another way, to work the ranch harder, to sell cattle, to do anything. He had only said one thing: "You want your brother's eating, girl? You want a roof over your head?" Elias Boone offered to pay the whole sum. Man wants a wife who can read, cook, and keep house. You ought to be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted bitter as gunpowder in her mouth. "Abigail Carter," the preacher said, "do you take Elias Boone to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" The church fell so quiet, Abby could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. For one wild second she thought of running. Bolting down the aisle, past her father's startled face, out into the cold fall air. She pictured the road out of town, yellow grass bending in the wind. But where would she go? Her mother lay buried on the hill behind the Carter ranch. Her younger brothers needed food. There was no place for a runaway girl in this hard land. She lifted her chin. Her voice came out small, but steady. "I do." A murmur rippled through the church. Then the preacher turned to the man beside her. Abby had not looked at him fully since he walked in. Only glimpses. A tall shape in a worn buckskin coat, broad shoulders, dark hair brushing his collar, hands rough as tree bark. "Elias Boone," the preacher said, "do you take Abigail Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" The silence grew heavy again. Abby felt the air change beside her. Slowly, she let her eyes slide sideways just enough to see him. He was not what she expected. His face was lean and sunburned, marked by a scar that cut through his left eyebrow and faded along his cheek. His jaw was dark with stubble. His mouth was set in a firm line, but it was his eyes that froze her. They were not wild or cruel. They were a stormy gray, watchful and tired, like a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. Those eyes met hers for the first time. In that brief moment, Abby felt something she did not understand. Not safety, not fear. Something in between. A question. A warning. "I do," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel rolling in a stream. It sent a shiver down her spine. The preacher hurried through the final words, hands shaking as he closed his Bible. By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and in the sight of Almighty God, I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride. Abby's breath caught. Her heart leaped into her throat. She had not thought past this moment. Had not thought about his mouth on hers, or his hands, or the life waiting beyond the church doors. Panic rose fast. Elias stepped closer. She smelled pine smoke and leather on him. The cold air of the mountains clung to his coat. His hand lifted, and she flinched before she could stop herself. A few women gasped. A miner snickered under his breath. For a long second, Elias just stood there looking at her. Then, instead of grabbing her or forcing a kiss, he bent his head and brushed the lightest touch against her forehead. It was barely more than a feather's breadth. The whole church gasped. It was not a kiss of a man claiming a prize. It was something else entirely. "Let's get you out of here," he murmured, so softly only she could hear. They walked down the aisle together, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. Townsfolk parted around them. Some stared, some whispered, some looked confused by the strange, gentle kiss from a man with such a violent name. Outside, the sky hung heavy with gray clouds. The wind cut sharp as a knife. Elias led her to a big bay horse, hitched to a wagon loaded with supplies. A second saddled mare was tied behind. Her father came out and clapped Elias on the shoulder, not even looking at Abby. "Much obliged, Boone," he said. "You got yourself a good worker there. Girl knows how to keep a house." Abby's cheeks burned. Elias turned his head slowly. For the first time, his voice went cold as steel. "She is not a worker," he said. "She is my wife." Her father's smile faltered, but he said nothing. Elias helped Abby into the wagon, his large hands careful at her waist. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, she realized she was shaking again. The road to the mountains stretched long and empty ahead. They rode in silence for miles. The town shrank behind them. The land rose and roughened. The wagon creaked. The horses snorted. The wind tugged at her hair. "You scared of me?" he asked at last, eyes still on the trail. It was not a challenge. It was not mocking. Abby swallowed. Her fingers twisted in her skirt. "I do not know you," she said, "but I know what people say." He let out a short breath that was almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. People say a lot of things. The sun dipped low by the time they reached the foothills. Pine trees thickened, and the air turned colder and sharper. At last, a small log cabin came into view, built snug against a rock outcrop. Smoke curled from the chimney. It was lonely and rough, but not unkind. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop and hopped down. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The word twisted in Abby's chest. She stepped down, boots crunching on frozen ground, her heart pounding so loud she thought he must hear it. He carried her trunk inside with ease. The cabin was simple, a stone fireplace with a steady fire, a rough table and 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars and tools, a narrow bed against one wall, and a cot rolled up nearby. Everything was neat, nothing wasted. Abby stood in the doorway, hands knotted, waiting for the man she had married to finally show himself. Elias set the trunk down and turned to face her fully. Firelight threw shadows across his scarred face. His gray eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "Abigail," he said, "there is something you need to know about this marriage." Her heart skipped about why I really came down from the mountains to get you. He reached up and slowly unbuckled the gun belt from his hips, laying it on the table between them. "You were not bought," he said. "You were saved from something worse." Abby stared at him, her pulse racing as he lifted his head and spoke the name of the man she feared most in the world. Roy Maddox. The name hung in the cabin like smoke that would not clear. Abby's fingers went cold. She wrapped her arms around herself without thinking, as if that could keep the fear from settling into her bones. Roy Maddox owned the biggest spread outside Silver Creek. He owned half the town's debts, too. Men spoke his name the same way they talked about winter storms or snake bites, as something you prayed would pass you by. Abby had seen him only a few times, but that had been enough. The way his pale eyes crawled over people. The way he smiled when someone lost everything at his card table. "He wanted you," Elias said quietly. Abby shook her head, like she could shake the words loose. "He wanted the ranch," she said. "My father said that was all." "Your father lied," Elias answered. There was no softness in his voice now. Maddox did not just want the land. He wanted you tied to his house where no one could say a word. No preacher. No vows. Just his rules. Her stomach twisted hard. Memories she had tried to bury pushed up fast. The day Maddox came to the ranch with his men, how he leaned on the corral fence, hat tipped back, eyes fixed on her like she was a mare he meant to buy. How his hand brushed her arm when she passed with the water bucket, fingers pressing a little too long. Her father had laughed it off. "He is just playing," he had said. "Man is rich. You ought to be flattered." "I told him no," Abby whispered. "I told him I would never step foot in his house." Elias nodded once. "He does not hear that word." Abby sank him to the nearest chair. The fire popped behind her. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. "How do you know all this?" she asked. Elias leaned his hands on the back of the other chair and bowed his head. For a moment, he did not answer. Firelight showed deep lines of tiredness around his eyes. "Because Maddox's men killed my brother," he said. The words were plain, but they hit like blows. Abby looked up, shocked. "Killed him?" she whispered. "His name was Daniel," Elias said. "Younger than me. Still thought the world had more good than bad in it. He hired on with Maddox to wrangle cattle. When he saw what Maddox did to folks who owed him money, he tried to walk away. Men like Maddox do not let witnesses walk away." Abby stared at him, trying to fit this truth into the picture she had been given all her life of the wild, dangerous mountain man. "That is when you went into the mountains," she said softly. Elias nodded. "After I buried him. After I made Maddox pay as much as the law would let me. There was a fight at the saloon. 3 of his men did not walk away. Sheriff said there was no proof I lost my temper. He gave me a choice, jail in a town owned by Maddox, or the high country where I could not cause more trouble." "And they all said you were the dangerous one," Abby murmured. Elias let out that short, humorless breath again. It suited Maddox fine. Men fear what they do not understand. Everything Abby thought she knew spun apart. "So why come back now?" she asked. "Why risk it?" "Because the sheriff sent word to my trapline," Elias said. "He told me Maddox was calling in your father's debt, said Maddox wanted you in his house by the end of the month, or he would take the ranch and throw your brothers into the cold." Abby's chest tightened. "The sheriff knew what that meant," Elias went on. "He also knew the law would not stop Maddox if your father agreed to it. So he wrote me a letter. Said there was a girl about the age my brother would be if he lived. Said she needed a door Maddox could not open." He lifted his head and met her eyes. "I came down from the mountains with every dollar I had. I bought the markers myself. Maddox hates me, but he hates losing money more. Marriage tied to my name was the only way to shut that door." Abby's throat burned. "So you saved me to get back at him?" Elias shook his head. "No. I saved you because I could not save Daniel." Silence filled the cabin, heavy but not cruel. "You are safe here," he said at last. "I will not touch you unless you ask. I will not make you share my bed. We can be strangers under one roof if that is what you want. But I will not let Maddox lay a finger on you." Abby stared at him. The most feared man in the territory was promising her something no one ever had before: choice. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve the truth," he said. "You did not choose this. The least I can do is not lie to you." That night she slept alone in the narrow bed, listening to the wind slide around the cabin and the quiet creak of the cot by the fire. Her fear did not vanish, but something else settled beside it, a fragile sense that maybe she had not been thrown to the wolves, but pulled from their jaws. Morning came gray and cold. Snow clouds piled over the peaks. Elias handed her a worn coat patched at the sleeves. "Work to do if we are to eat through winter," he said. "Only if you feel strong enough." She followed him outside. They chopped wood, hauled water, checked the snares set among the trees. Her arms ached, but the ache felt honest. Different from the dull tiredness of endless chores done under sharp words, they were walking back with an armload of kindling when Elias stopped so suddenly she nearly ran into him. "Riders," he said. Her heart jumped. Soon she heard it too. Hooves. Harness. Voices carried thin on the cold air. "Hunters?" she said, though she did not believe it. "Hunters do not ride this high in a bunch," Elias answered. He took her arm and guided her toward the cabin. "Get inside. Bolt the back shutter. Stay away from the window." Her blood ran cold. "Do you think it is Maddox?" "I think a snake does not like having something taken from its teeth." She hurried inside, hands shaking as she latched the shutter. Through a crack in the front window, she saw them appear on the trail. 4 men riding hard. Roy Maddox led them, his long black coat snapping in the wind. Elias stepped off the porch, rifle easy in his hands. "Well now," Maddox called, smiling thin as a knife. "Heard a rumor my little bride ran off to the mountains." "She is my wife," Elias said, "and she is not yours to take." Maddox laughed. "Debt says different. The debt is paid." Maddox's gaze slid toward the cabin. "Abigail," he called, "you come out now and I might be generous." Abby's hands shook on the latch. Fear pulled at her, the old habit of obeying powerful men. Then she remembered Elias's words, "You are safe here." She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "No," she said. 4 heads turned. Maddox smiled. "There she is." She walked down to stand beside Elias. Her knees trembled, but she did not move away. "You do not speak for me," she said. "You never did." Maddox's smile faded as more riders appeared down the trail. Sheriff Briggs rode between them, eyes sharp. "Looks like I arrived in time," the sheriff said. He listened, then held up papers of his own. "Debt was sold and paid. Your claim ended." Maddox's face twisted with rage. He reached for his gun. The rifle cracked. Maddox screamed and fell, clutching his shoulder. Snow drifted down as deputies moved in fast. Elias handed his rifle to the sheriff. "I am done letting him make me a monster," he said. When it was over, Abby stood shaking on the porch. Elias's hands trembled too. "You could have killed him," she said. "I know," he answered. "I am tired of burying men." She touched his scarred cheek. "You shocked them all today." "Only one opinion matters to me," he said. "Whose?" "Yours." Snow fell thick and quiet around the cabin. Abby thought of the girl in the church, shaking in her mother's dress. "I was forced to marry you," she said, "but I do not feel forced now. If you ever want to leave," he said, "I will not stop you." She smiled softly. "I am already home." She rose on her toes and kissed him. This time, she chose. Outside, the storm gathered. Inside, something gentle began to grow. The snow did not stop for 3 days. It wrapped the cabin in silence and white, sealing Abby and Elias into a world that felt far away from Silver Creek and all its sharp eyes. Smoke curled steady from the chimney, and the creek sang soft under its skin of ice. News still found them. On the 4th morning, a rider climbed the trail, his horse blown and flecked with snow. It was Sheriff Briggs. He stamped his feet on the porch and took off his hat, his face tired but lighter than Abby had ever seen it. "Maddox lived," he said plainly. He will stand trial in Helena when the pass clears. Charges are stacking up. Men are talking now that they are not scared of him. Abby let out a breath. She felt like she had been holding for years. "And your father?" she asked. The sheriff looked down. "Ranch stays in his name. But the town is watching him close now. Folks do not look kindly on men who sell their daughters anymore." Elias nodded once. "Good." Before he left, the sheriff paused, looking around the small cabin. "Town's going to change its tune about you, Boone," he said. "They already are." Elias did not answer. He only shut the door after him and leaned his back against it, eyes closed for a long moment. Winter settled in hard. Days became a rhythm of work and quiet learning. Abby cooked and cleaned, but not because she was told to. Elias trapped and hunted, and in the evenings he sat at the table while Abby traced letters on rough paper and taught him to read. He listened like a man starving for something he never knew he needed. Sometimes the past crept in. Elias woke from sleep with his breath sharp and his hands clenched. Abby learned to sit beside him until the shaking passed, never asking questions he was not ready to answer. When spring came, the snow pulled back from the mountains inch by inch. Green pushed through the brown. Abby planted a small garden by the cabin, her hands deep in the earth. Elias built a second chair for the table and a wider bed, though he did not say why. One afternoon, riders appeared again on the trail. Abby's heart jumped, but Elias only smiled faintly. Her brothers climbed down first, thin and wide-eyed. Behind them came her father, older somehow, smaller. "I came to see if you were alive," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I am," Abby answered. They ate together in stiff silence. When they left, her father stood awkwardly at the door. "I was wrong," he said at last. "About everything." Abby nodded. "I know." She did not follow them down the mountain. Years later, people still told the story in Silver Creek. They said the most feared mountain man had shocked everyone. They said he married a girl to save her and then gave her something no one else ever had. A choice. And they said the girl stayed not because she had to, but because she wanted to. High in the Bitterroot Mountains, a cabin stood warm against the cold, built on truth instead of fear.